That's why in the book I've written that I hate the word menopause, perimenopause, PMS, PMDD. They're just labels for women. But if I said to you, I've done a blood test, Fearne, and you've got low, I haven't, by the way, just for your listeners, but, but you've got low testosterone, and that's why you're feeling more tired, you're having headaches, whatever. Would you like to try testosterone just for a short time, see if it's going to help your symptoms?
Yes.
It makes the conversation then really easy. We've just published data to show that 92% of women with suicidal thoughts reduce their suicidal thoughts when they're prescribed progesterone, estradiol and testosterone. 92% reduction. I've already said 1 in 6 of our patients come to our clinic with suicidal thoughts. Why wasn't that in the front page of the papers?
Louise, I'm so thrilled to have you on the podcast.
I'm very excited to be here, and it's lovely. I'm going to sit here all day and stroke your chairs. They're
wanted
lovely.
Tactile chairs. Just
they're very
I
nice.
like to fiddle with, textures and a pen and Miss Fidget. So I thought, these chairs are quite nice,
very nice
and comforting.
I feel very calm.
We have got so much to talk about today. It is unbelievable. Now, of course, you are the doctor known for kickstarting the menopause. You're rolling your eyes, the menopause revolution. But my God, did we need it, and do we still need it? And it seems like many women out there are really on board with having this conversation now and learning and being open-minded. But is the medical world ready for this chat?
No. It's not. And I'm really proud of being a doctor, really proud. No one in my family has been a medical doctor, and I wanted to be a doctor since I was 4. So, it's something I feel very, very privileged to be a doctor. And I went into medicine to help everybody. I've worked in some really deprived areas, including in prisons, and I never judge my patients because they all have problems. But what I learned really young as a doctor is to listen and believe your patients and put them in the centre of your consultations, which is what I do every day. And the biggest agenda with all of this, and I've written a chapter about it in my book actually, is women not being listened to and not being believed. And that is something that I'm really, really sad about. So we can talk about whether doctors are educated about hormones or not, which is a problem. But for me, the biggest problem is the stories that I hear every day for women not being listened to, not being believed, not being taken seriously. And in my clinic, when I see new patients, before I finish the consultation, they thank me. That's before they've used any hormones, before they've had any treatment, because I've believed them and listened to them. And the stories that I hear, the way other doctors have spoken to them, just fills me with horror. Because as a doctor, I don't know everything, but I could say to you, Fearne, I'm not really sure what's going on. Let me just have a little think, or let's do some tests, or I'm going to talk to a colleague. And you probably feel quite reassured. But if I cross my arms and say, I think it's all in your head, you will feel awful.
Yeah.
And, I've got a small family, and my middle daughter had sepsis a few years ago, and Martha's Law wasn't a thing then, but I had to demand for her to stay into hospital. And I'm sure I saved her life that night. But I've got a lot of balls and I've got medical knowledge, but I realise how vulnerable patients are. And this is the bigger conversation really about hormonal care, health of women, all of that. It's just that side of it really irritates me.
Well, I bet, because, we all know, and we've touched on this in other episodes before, to a degree, that we know that women's health is not taken seriously when it comes to, and if you think women, young girls, start their period, could be as young as 11, and then have to deal with, fluctuating hormone levels and everything that comes with having a period, a menstrual cycle, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, until we're, 40s, 50s. That's a big section of our lives that isn't really being taken seriously. So I'm sure that plays into a large part of it. Also, I'm imagining doctors being time poor, that you get these 5-minute segments with people.
I don't think it doesn't take long to be kind to people. I've been a GP for many years, 10-minute consultations. And actually on a Monday morning, we used to do 5-minute. I can't believe we did it, just to try and get through some of the emergencies for the day. But you can really learn a lot in a short space of time if you listen, but also if you educate people. So as you hopefully know, I've worked really hard the last 10 years to try and educate women so they can make choices themselves. So what I feel almost guilty for now is that women are educated, like you say. So they might have, downloaded Balance, got the symptom questionnaire, printed it off and say to their doctor, because it's always one problem, one consultation, I think it's my hormones because I've got this symptom. They're really empowered. So as a doctor who's educated, it's really easy because you go, right, I'm thinking hormones now. I'm not thinking palpitations, heart problem, or joint problem, joint pains, rheumatological problem. It's easy. The patient's giving you the diagnosis, really. But then it's still people aren't joining the dots, and that's what's really difficult. So it doesn't take long. You know, if you came to me saying, oh, I'm a bit tired and I'm crying a lot and I've got joint pain, that's going to take me 10 minutes to listen to your symptoms. But if you've prepared, you've got everything on a tick box and you're saying, Dr. Newson, these are my symptoms. I would now like to talk to you about whether I can take hormones. I've got 9.5 minutes to talk to you about hormones. It's quite a long time.
So it's really for the patient taking back control to say, I've got a feeling as to what's up, rather than, oh my God, I don't know what's going on with me, but I'm really struggling. I think the ripple effects of women not being informed previously, but also, as you say, the medical world not catching up with this conversation is many women, like me, have got their head buried in the sand. So in many ways, I'm the perfect person to interview today. Not only about your new book, which I fucking raced through because I was just like, I need this book right now. The Power of Hormones. We'll put all the details in the podcast copy. But I am that typical mid-40s woman who is totally and utterly in denial. My head's buried in the sand. I don't know. I think because I have found the conversation around perimenopause and menopause overwhelming at times, and you're fed so many different pieces of advice. And also people like to regurgitate their own narrative to
which is worse.
Which then, you know, you could start thinking, oh, maybe I should go and talk to someone about this, or should I start hormones? And then someone else says, definitely don't because of this, or the fear mongering comes in. So I am that person right now who is still slightly head in the sand. And I know I've got certain symptoms. My periods are certainly getting closer together. So the cycle is shorter. The periods can be shorter, but I can get a bad headache on day one and a heavy period on day one. And then it's kind of very light after that. So I know that there's changes. I know there's stuff going on, but I'm doing nothing about it. And I reckon there's a large portion of my listeners of my age who feel exactly the same.
They're confused. I hate my Instagram. I mean, I love it and I hate it. So whenever I go on it, there's all this stuff like, oh my God, what do I believe? Who do I trust? It's just awful. But can I ask you a question? If you had like low iron, would you take an iron tablet?
Yeah.
And if you had an underactive thyroid gland making you really tired, would you take thyroxine?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting, isn't it? Because you know, that's why in the book I've written that I hate the word menopause, perimenopause, you know, PMS, PMDD. They're just labels for women. But if I said to you, I've done a blood test, Fearne, and you've got low, I mean, I haven't, by the way, just for your listeners, but, you know, but you've got low testosterone and that's why you're feeling more tired, you're having headaches, whatever. Would you like to try testosterone just for a short time, see if it's going to help your symptoms?
Yes.
It makes the conversation then really easy.
Exactly. I guess what we need to do first is debunk some of the myths, perhaps, or the fears that women have. So you say in your book, only 15% of women in England, are, or the UK, are currently getting hormone therapy, the lowest in years and years.
Isn't it?
More likely because of these fears. One of the big ones being a story that we've seen in the news, circulating, it comes back around the link between taking hormones and breast cancer. This is a big subject to dive into straight off the bat, but I think it's the one that we need to tackle.
It's really important. So I think before I answer that, we need to just remember what hormones are, because so many people think hormones are something we prescribe. They're not something we produce ourselves.
Yes.
So we produce dozens of hormones. They're just chemical messengers that go into our bloodstream, made in different organs in our body. They all have defined actions, but they're really important for our cells, our organs to work properly. So the hormones we're talking about are only progesterone, estrogen, but I really talk about estradiol because that's the best form of estrogen, and testosterone, to keep it really simple. But when I prescribe hormones or HRT, there's loads of different types. So there's the ones that I prescribe day in, day out, which are the same structure as estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, because they've all got their own chemical structure. So they are the body identical natural hormones. You're replacing like with like. But when HRT was first made, and that's where you've got that whole history of HRT in the book, it was made synthetically, because one of the problems which isn't really a problem. But when they made it more naturally, you could buy it over the counter. But the pharmaceutical companies wanted to clearly make money. They worked with gynecologists and scientists, and they made a synthetic version. So they changed the chemical structure. Now, even if you don't know much about chemistry, most people know that water is H2O, 2 hydrogens with 1 oxygen atom. If you add 1 more oxygen and make H2O2, it's hydrogen peroxide, it's bleach. So just to highlight to you, a small change in the chemical structure can make a huge difference to properties. So they changed the chemical structure so it's like estrogen, like progesterone, and even they've made lots of synthetic testosterones. It's like testosterone, but it's not. It doesn't work the same in the body. So you know quite simply that putting something that's a chemical in your body is not going to have the same biological effects.
No.
It's not going to bind to that receptor and unlock those lovely, beautiful cascades. You know, even Lizelle talking about mitochondrial function. Like, I love mitochondria. They're the powerhouse of all our cells. But we've got receptors for estradiol, progesterone, testosterone on our mitochondria, not for synthetic estrogen, not for synthetic progestrogens, not for synthetic testosterone. So once you know that, that's really important, because all the risks with HRT, including that big, terrible study that came out in 2002, was using synthetic hormones. So you can almost discard it, other than the hormones they used are still similar to hormones in contraception. So it brings a whole new complexity. And that's what I do tease out in my book as well. The whole history of contraception, because they're not hormones, they're synthetic chemicals.
And I took that without even thinking back in the day. I was like, I'll take whatever pill you've got, give it to me. I did no research. So it's weird that there's so much more focus on this side of it.
This is what I find. I wish I'd written this book 10 years ago, really, because 20 years ago, I was the same as you. I took the pill. I didn't actually know. No one taught me at medical school that it wasn't a hormone. It was only because I'm very scientific, evidence-based. I've had a lot of blue sky thinking as a doctor, because I've worked as a medical writer for so long and an educator, that I sort of sat down and just thought, what is the difference? They're all called different. They can't be the same. And then once you understand them and you understand how they work differently in the body, it's suddenly this big wake-up call and think, hang on, they're not hormones. We need to be really clear with our language. And women are being misguided, but so are doctors, because the doctors that are scared of HRT are merely prescribing synthetic contraception for 12-year-olds with acne. And I'm like, hang on, we don't know. We know that all synthetic hormones have a small risk of clots and heart attacks and stroke and cancers. We know that they probably get into the DNA, so whatever goes on might be transmitted to other generations. And we've known that with some other types of synthetic hormones. But no one's really looking at that. They're still trying to stop women from having natural hormones, which improve symptoms but also improve our future health.
Is there such a thing as a contraceptive pill that isn't synthetic?
Wouldn't that be nice?
There isn't.
So there is and there isn't. So there's one called Zoli, Z-O-E-L-Y, which contains estradiol, not ethinyl estradiol.
Right.
Now, we've known since 1979, the World Health Organization put out a report to show that ethinyl estradiol is carcinogenic, so causes cancer. So, but every combined oral contraceptive, bar one, contains ethinyl estradiol. All of them contain a synthetic progestogen.
Right.
But what's ironic is that when contraception came to market, it was just for periods. They didn't even test it properly as a contraception. Then they changed the marketing after a year because it was going so well and women weren't having periods. They thought, oh, it's probably fine for contraception. So sales doubled. But they never did testing of the contraception on the bones, the brain, the heart, on our other organs. All the testing was done on the womb. A lot of it was done in the war, actually, as well, in concentration camps. It's mind-blowing when you read the history.
God.
Yeah.
I think because we were fed at a young age, the fear of getting pregnant as a teenager was so huge. You're like, I'll do anything
precisely
to avoid that.
And we were taught at medical school, you have to worry about the risks of unwanted pregnancies and backstreet abortions and all of that. And I'm not coming onto here to say that we can't use contraception. It's like I sort of explain to people sometimes who don't understand, the difference between having roast chicken and chicken flavour crisps. Like chicken flavour crisps do not contain chicken. They might taste like chicken. It doesn't mean you can't eat crisps, but you just need to know they're probably not the healthiest thing to have.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's the same with if it's the only option for you, then absolutely. But you've just got to know there are small risks associated with all these synthetic hormones. I mean, Zoli, like I say, the estradiol contains, which is better. Some people top up with other hormones as well. So someone might have a merinocoilin, which is a synthetic hormone. And it can block the ovaries working, so it can lower estradiol, progesterone, testosterone. So then some people take those hormones as well,
right,
which will improve their symptoms and future health too.
The thing that grates the most, I guess, is that all of this is on women and young girls. You know, so not only do we have no choice, if we're looking first and foremost at the contraceptive pill, okay, we've got no choice. We're like, I guess I'll take the synthetic one. But there's not much research seemingly into let's look at a natural alternative, but equally nothing on the boy/man to
well, this is why
be part of that conversation.
In men has never really taken off, because if you say to a man, right, I'm going to give you a synthetic hormone that's like testosterone but not, it will reduce your fertility, but it will probably block your hormone receptors in your brain. It might make you feel low and flat. It will increase your risk of clot and cancer and heart attacks. Quite rightly, they'll say no. And actually, to get a drug to market now is a lot harder. Perfect, because we've got, more stringent rules. We have to do more studies. Yep. In the 60s, there was no ethical consent. They had no proper studies. And in fact, when you do read some of the studies, a lot of them, they disregarded some of the risks and the problems because they said that we can't prove it's a direct cause. So they had no real idea what they were doing. But these drugs were pushed by the pharmaceutical companies. Once it's got licensed, you don't have to do the same stringent studies. So I do wonder if the pill was or the contraceptive were brought to market now in 2026, would it get over the line? And I can't answer that question, but it's just
this is just all so crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's a minefield that I'm happy to dig into and let's really dissect it and get into it, because it's so important for women. I think because so many women and young girls, even if I wasn't cognizant of it as a young person, but we feel so out of control in terms of what our options are. I think that's why my head's been in the sand. So let's move on now to looking at, women of my age, which will be a large portion of my audience, will be women who will be perhaps thinking about this, or women slightly younger thinking, I should start to prepare for what that looks like down the line. When you go to your GP thinking, I probably have got some symptoms here that are alluding to, hormonal changes in my body, are you automatically offered the synthetic HRT initially? Is that how it works now?
It really varies.
Right.
It really varies. There's a big move to changing to the body identical hormones. 10 years ago, it was very much one size fits all, and it was usually the synthetic hormones. So there is a choice, and often people say the patches, the gel, if the patches are just the pure estradiol, and it will stay on them, it's a bit like food. If you look at the ingredients, it will say if it says estradiol, that's fine. The tablets, the micronized progesterone, usually Utrogestan in the UK, and then sometimes we give it as pessaries or suppositories, the pure progesterone. Testosterone, the cream or gel, is testosterone. It's not one of the synthetic hormones. But it's important to know, because it's not just perimenopause or menopause. So many women have PMS. 95% probably of us have PMS. PMDD, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, is a more severe form. Postnatal depression affects 85,000 women a year in the UK, and it's all due to hormonal changes. And some women are more sensitive than others to these hormonal changes. And these hormones, as you know, are made in our brain. And I'm more concerned about the effect on our brains than anything else. Because mental health, we know, is in a crisis. And we know that more women and children, actually, are prescribed antidepressants than they are hormones.
But they're misdiagnosed as having, we had Callie Beaton on here, a comedian who's written a brilliant book about the changes in midlife. And one of the big fuck ups for her was she went to the doctor and they said, you've got bipolar. And she was prescribed a ton of medication. And then she realised she was going through the menopause. And it hadn't even been on the doctor's radar to quiz her about that.
I'm doing my theatre tour at the moment, and I've called it Breaking the Cycle, the power of hormones, because people are locked in this cycle of mental health. Once you get diagnosed, usually with a mental health condition, that's it. You're on this trajectory with antidepressants, antipsychotics, lithium. I've seen people that have had ketamine infusions, £8,000 ketamine infusions, 45-year-old woman, no one asked about her hormones. No one thought about her hormones. And this is really scary because we've known for decades the importance of hormones in our brain to improve our mental health. And actually 60 years ago, doctors were giving natural hormones for postnatal depression, postnatal psychosis, PMDD, natural progesterone. It's not rocket science.
No.
And women improved. But, we've got all these other chemicals that people have been given, whether it's synthetic hormones or whether it's antidepressants, antipsychotics. And very few people are thinking about hormones, and it doesn't make sense.
So if we, like me, know very little about hormones, what are our hormones impacting physically, mentally? What are they doing?
So they affect every cell in our body. So that means every organ. So you could literally list, going from your head down, literally, obviously, so many functions in the brain. So that's why memory problems, anxiety, low mood, poor concentration, sleep problems related to hormones changing in the brain. Eyes, dry eyes, mouth, burning mouth, sore mouth, teeth changes, even smell changes, just going down the body. Palpitations, very common. Breathing changes can occur. Asthma increases without hormones, for example. Coughing, obstructive sleep apnea, where people have difficulty breathing at night. Muscle and joint pains, really, really common. Also, gastrointestinal symptoms. A lot of people in their 40s get diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. A lot of that's related to our hormones.
Wow.
Our hormones affect our gut microbiome in a positive way. So if we don't have them, bloating, heartburn, indigestion, very common symptoms, constipation, all of that can occur.
It's basically
everything. It's totally
everything.
Urinary symptoms, really common, UTIs, incontinence, weak bladder, all of that can be related to hormones as well. Restless legs. I mean, we've got a symptom questionnaire that we use for all our patients, but it's also in Balance, the app, and it's got over 80 symptoms because I extended it. Well, you did use one that had 21 symptoms, but I extended it a year or so ago because I find it really useful as a doctor, so I can eyeball all those symptoms, but also patients do, and women, because they look and go, oh, I didn't realise my hair changes, my skin changes, all of this could be related. And that's really important because often, when you ask women, they're quite intuitive.
Oh, yeah.
And if the symptoms are similar to maybe how they've had those days before their periods, they're more likely to be tuned in and go, do you know what? I think there's some hormonal change.
Yeah.
And it's just the suffering. So many women are having these symptoms and just putting up with them. Even PMS, for example. My oldest daughter has PMDD, and she's had a really difficult time. And thankfully, she's so much better because she takes natural hormones. But she's had some very, very dark times. And she said to me, but Mummy, it's just not those 3 days that I feel awful. The rest of the month, I'm dreading those days coming.
Yes.
She's a trombonist. So she said, what happens if I'm doing an audition or I'm playing in a concert? Like, I can't function. She said, but the rest of the days when I'm feeling great, I just think, surely I can't feel this bad. It must be, it can't be because it's so black and white. And then it comes and I'm just like in this hole. And I see that so much with my patients, and I see a lot of her friends as patients now. And a lot of them are great, really clever musicians, are quite neurodivergent, a lot going on. A lot of them have had from very difficult upbringings, so they've always been blamed for their trauma, their past or whatever. But I give them often just some natural progesterone for a few days when their mood dips of the cycle. And one of them said to me the other day, Louise, I'd just like to thank you because you've transformed my life. And are you sure it's legal to feel this good every day of the month? And it really made me think though, Fearne, because yes, we should feel good every day of the month. Like, can you imagine saying to a man, like, once a month you're going to have a duvet day, you probably feel a bit shit, you won't want to go to work.
Not only that, you're going to be paranoid that you're going to be... I'm constantly like, can I wear that outfit at that time of the month? Because I'm going to be checking the whole time, the paranoia, the worry. Can I get to a loo quickly if I'm out in public?
Yeah, totally. And then there's all this about, well, you should change your exercise. So those few days before a month when your hormones are low, you could just like not do so much cardio and you should rest. And it's like, hang on, stop it. If we're getting any symptoms, the first thing as women we should do is think, right, could it be my hormones, and could topping up my hormones in a very natural way help? Because evolutionary. We have to remember we are designed to have hormones in our body. And, in the Victorian times, we were pregnant more than we weren't. Lots of pregnancies, really high levels of hormones actually in our body. But the average age of menopause was about 57. The average age of death was 59. But we have to be thinking, actually, these hormones are really beneficial for our day-to-day functioning, but our future health. So women who don't take hormones have a higher risk of inflammatory diseases, heart disease, osteoporosis, diabetes, dementia, autoimmune diseases, multiple sclerosis, all those diseases that increase as we age, but increase without hormones. And studies have even shown women with PMDD, because they have half of their cycle or a weaker cycle, so, good chunk of their time without hormones, they have an increased risk of future diseases. So we have to sort of spin it on its head a bit and think, what are the risks of me not having hormones, rather than what are the risks? Because taking natural body identical hormones, how do they have risks when they're our own hormones?
So is there any risk of, say, the big one that we keep getting fed in the press, breast cancer?
Yeah.
Is there any risk of that with the body identical
hormones? When we look at the study, that scary study, there were two groups of people. There were people that they only gave estrogen to, and that was the pregnant horse's urine. So it was a bit different to what we prescribe now, but it had estrogen in it.
Yeah.
But there was also the people that had estrogen with a synthetic progestogen called medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is still used in contraception now. But the risk of breast cancer was small, wasn't statistically significant, was only in the arm of the study that had the synthetic progestogen.
Right.
The ones who had estrogen had about a 44% lower incidence of breast cancer. So there's no evidence anywhere in the studies that estrogen causes breast cancer, which is really important for people to know.
So if you were to go to the doctor and they took the symptoms seriously and they said, right, we're going to prescribe you HRT, but it was the synthetic version. Do you have the autonomy at your local GP to say, I want body identical?
Yeah. Firstly, body identical is actually depends on the region, but it's similar price or slightly cheaper than the synthetic. So they can't use cost as a thing. The guidelines that I think are the most important are shared decision-making guidelines, which is for any condition. So if I'm your doctor and you come to me and say, I really don't want to take iron and I've got low iron, and I'll say to you, well, Fearne, you've got the risk that you're going to be more tired and, you've got this low iron, and unless you eat differently or take an iron supplement, it's going to carry on. And you might say, well, that's fine. I want to carry on like that. You are allowed to be involved in that consultation and share the decision, even if your decision isn't what I would recommend as a doctor. So this is what's really important that people know. And that's why it's so sad that people do go to their doctors and say, I would really like to try hormones. I would like to try testosterone. And they're met with this no. I met somebody at the theatre tour a couple of days ago. She said to me she felt so prepared for her consultation. She'd printed off some information from Balance app. She had the questionnaire. She went to her doctor, and her doctor said, this information is wrong, and Dr Louise Newson you don't trust. Stood up and marched her out of the consultation room. So she was crying and said, I've just given up now. I'm 62. There's no point me even trying to go back to another doctor. She might have 20, 30 years of her life without hormones, putting her life at risk. And she wanted to try them. This is where in my head, I get so sad, because these stories are all the time.
And you not only are you trying to get this information out there and debunk, myths that are putting women off getting the help that they need. You genuinely want to help women, want to stop the suffering of women in general. You personally have had a lot of backlash and had to, and I can't even imagine how that's felt. When you're passionate about something and you've spent your life's work is studying this, to be constantly pushing against that must be personally exhausting.
Horrible. It's horrible. You've got children. It's not just me. It has had a big impact on my whole family. They, as a mum, you're the strong person. You get everything together. For them to see me broken last year is really hard, like really difficult. But, I've got 3 daughters and they won't let me stop working. They're like, you get back out there, because every day you're helping these women who have suicidal thoughts. 1 in 6 of our patients have suicidal thoughts. I've funded a PhD student in suicide prevention, and we've got some amazing results. And, a lot of people, they've got nowhere else to go to. But last year I was close to having to close my clinic because of the financial impact that Panorama did to me. And it's like, if that goes, Balance app goes, my podcast goes, everything goes. But also, I went into medicine to do the best, and I've not done anything wrong. There are loads of doctors out there that have done things wrong, and, they should be sanctioned, but often they get off. So I feel like so strongly, because I'm very fortunate. I'm on hormones and I know who to go to, you'll be pleased to know, to get good advice. But, when I was doing some voluntary work in prisons, these women have no voice and no one's prescribing them hormones. I said to the prison doctor, do you ever prescribe testosterone in the prison? They were like, no, why would we do that? Women don't need a libido in prison. I said, but they might be in a same-sex relationship, but you don't always need a man and a penis to have a libido. I mean, the colour just drained from her face. And then obviously they reported me for even going into the prisons and educating women. And this is where I feel like sad, because I'm not here saying you have to take hormones, but you have to know the benefits, you have to know the risks of not having them, and it's about choice. And my role is really as an educator. Really, people come to my clinic because they've decided they want hormones and they want the right dose and type for them. But my work is so much bigger than the clinic. It is just allowing people to have this knowledge that has sort of been hidden from us for so long. And I've spent a lot of time, thinking and reflecting, and I'm very evidence-based. I think it's about 30 pages of references in my book, because I'm very clear that I am telling a story. People keep calling me controversial, and I'm like, well, I'm not inventing a new drug.
Why do you think that is? Just because you're wanting to bust the myths?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes the truth hurts and it's uncomfortable. And I'm very, no, I didn't say I'm happy, because I'm not happy, but I wouldn't say, I don't mind admitting to you, Fearne, that I was that doctor that used to give contraception for heavy periods. I was the doctor that used to give 45-year-old women antidepressants because I didn't know about the effect of hormones. I was that doctor who, gave biologic agents to people with rheumatological problems because I didn't know there was an option. I didn't ask the right questions. And I've done a lot of hospital medicine, and I look back and I think, all those women I saw, all those women that we were admitting with all these different conditions, and I never thought about it. But, it's like anything in life, you learn and then you say, okay, I'm going to change my practice. But it's this resistance for others to learn that is harming women, and that's really sad.
And is that why you've been occasionally called controversial, or you've had shit thrown your way?
Yeah.
Because you want to do things differently and the medical world is a bit stuck in time?
I think there's and I've written about it in the book. I mean, medicine is very patriarchal.
Yeah.
My husband's a surgeon, and obviously, I courtesy to him every morning. I don't, but there is
mutual respect from both of you.
But there is this thing that in medicine, there's the surgeons, then there's the physicians, and then there's the GPs really at the bottom, which I really challenge, because I was doing hospital medicine. I only went into general practice so I could see my children and go part time and help bring them up really. But I've always worked as a medical writer. I've written books on evidence-based medicine. I've got a pathology degree, a science degree. So, I am clever, but I'm very inquisitive. I like to know, but why? I'm one of those people. But in medicine, you often learn from your peers. So you learn from your senior doctor. And if they tell you something and it's in a guideline, then you do it. And we're quite robotic. But because I've written and summarised guidelines for the Royal College of GPs, I worked for them for 20 years. I'm used to looking at the guidelines, looking at all the references that have been used, the studies, looking at who's written them, what conflicts they might have, which pharma involvement they've had, for example, and then summarising them properly for people. Lots of people don't have the luxury of that time. And I think what's happened is, in the past, menopause hormones has sort of been owned by gynecologists, if you like. I'm not a gynecologist. So some gynecologists have got quite rattled. And I know that because I've had a subject access request. I've got 350 pages of emails that they've written about me. Really frustrated that I'm doing work in unconventional ways as well. Because women in the past, like Katrina Dalton, who prescribed a lot of progesterone for women with PMDD and postnatal depression, was really slated as well because she was only a GP and she could reach her patients. But you know what it's like with the podcasts, with social media, you can reach people that you're never going to make money from, you're never going to know, but you're empowering them. And that's what I think a lot of them haven't liked, the way that I've gone away about things, but also, and they have told me, because inverted commas, I'm only a GP. And I find that really really frustrating. And it's sad because it's other colleagues. Like, we've all got plenty of work to do. And patients can choose. We can agree to disagree, but not do it to the extent that you make a panorama documentary about me and try and ruin me professionally and personally.
Yeah, I mean, horrific for you, horrific. But also, like you say, for all the women that you desperately want to help. And you say in the book, you don't want menopause, perimenopause to just be seen as a gynecological issue, because as you stated a moment ago, it's affecting literally every part of us physically and mentally. And maybe we're being reductive in terms of this conversation and going, it's just this, the reproductive part of women's bodies and that's it. Whereas we know it's not that.
It's just stupid, isn't it, really, to think that women are just their periods and fertility. It doesn't make any sense to me. And even the testosterone conversation, you know, some people, you just look in the media and all these experts are saying, we're so scared there's overprescribing of testosterone, it's getting out of control. A doctor even wrote that it was abusive, the amount of women who are being prescribed testosterone in private clinics. She didn't kindly mention my name, but I'm sure that's where she was pointing her finger at. Now, if you work out the stats, it's about 0.82%. So less than 1% of women are being prescribed testosterone. That isn't out of control. What is out of control are all the drugs that people are being prescribed instead of testosterone. And we've published some data that women who are on testosterone, as well as progesterone and estradiol, we can reduce their antidepressants, their antipsychotics, their painkillers, their gabapentin, their pregabalin. You know, those drugs I would lose sleep about prescribing for my patients. I don't lose sleep about prescribing natural hormones to patients who feel better.
You say that testosterone is the most misunderstood hormone. Why is that?
Well, look at the name, It's come from the testicles. We don't have testicles. So that's really confusing.
Yeah.
And then what happened is, as you know, the history of it, once they discovered testosterone, they made synthetic testosterones, went to market, and then athletes got hold of it. So then they were pumping themselves with synthetic testosterone. So then they have this weird body shape. They know it's associated with heart disease, other problems. And so that's why it's a banned substance. Even in sport, women are not allowed any form of testosterone, which is crazy. But we prescribe the same chemical structure as our own testosterone. And testosterone is made in our ovaries, our adrenal glands, but also in our brains as well. And so it's the most biologically active hormone we have. Testosterone starts to decline in our late 20s, early 30s. So it's not a menopause-related hormone. It's
and is that for men and women? That it starts to decline?
It's probably later,
right.
So it's usually in the 40s and 50s. Yeah, but it's a problem for men too. And men struggle to get testosterone, but women especially. And then when you look at the guidelines, they say it's if women have reduced sexual desire. And then some menopause societies say women have to have this ridiculous disorder called hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which is HSDD for short. If you look at one of the criteria, it says that women have to be severely psychologically distressed with their reduced libido for at least 6 months.
Wow.
So, like, can you
That's
imagine?
a lovely amount of suffering you have to go through. So
if you've been suffering for 5.5 months, I'd have to say, no, sorry, Fearne, come back in 2 weeks. Like, it's just bullshit. It's just ridiculous. But also, why does someone think that libido is just like the testosterone is just a tiny bit of our libido part of our brain when it affects every cell in our body? And we've known since the 1940s that testosterone helps with well-being, it helps with mood. They used to give it to people with period problems as a menopause treatment in the 40s. That's like 80 years ago.
So we've gone backwards with that one.
We've completely gone backwards, yeah.
Going back to something you said a moment ago, something just sparked in my head. If you are a woman who has an inkling that, you know, your hormones are changing, but you are on anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, etc. Can you take hormones in the same way?
Yeah, there's nothing that will interfere with natural hormones because that's what they are, if you see what I mean. Lots of people have told, someone contacted the clinic the other day and said, I've had a meningioma. I've been told I can never have hormones. So meningioma is a benign brain tumour. It's like, well, of course you can. You know, there's very few conditions that you absolutely can't have natural hormones because that's what they are. The synthetic hormones, very different.
Okay, so that's a really good thing to clear up because I think, again, some people are completely put off because someone has once said it to them. And
yeah,
they're like,
absolutely. Lots of people
it's
are
not
told
for me.
if they've got a family history of any cancer, they can't take hormones. Someone last night, because I do a live Q&A in the show as well, said that one of their family members had a clot. They're worried about the clot risk. There's no clot risk in progesterone, estradiol or testosterone. So just because you've been told something, the chances are it's not right.
There's also a terrifying fact in your book. You say that the suicide rates for women are the highest since 1994 in the age bracket 40 to 59, which, as we know, it's quite clearly the hormonal change, perimenopause, menopause era of a woman's life. But there is little, if any, correlation to hormones when we look at how the medical world are viewing those really scary, very real suicide rates.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's terrible. It's one of the reasons that I work as hard as I do, because I really worry about suicides, mental health. We know that about 84% of women with PMDD have suicidal thoughts. I mean, that's huge. But like you say, suicide rate is increased in these women. And of course, there's lots of reasons why people might want to harm and end their lives. But we can't keep ignoring the role of hormones, because we've known for many, many years that hormones can improve mental health, reduce suicidal thoughts. You know, we've just published data to show that 92% of women with suicidal thoughts reduce their suicidal thoughts when they're prescribed progesterone, estradiol and testosterone. 92% reduction. I've already said 1 in 6 of our patients come to our clinic with suicidal thoughts. Like, why wasn't that in the front page of the papers? I don't know, and I might be wrong, but I'm sure your listeners will tell me. I don't know of any psychiatric drug that will reduce suicidality by 92% that doesn't have long-term effects. And, you know, I wrote a training module for the Royal College of GPs a few years ago. And it took me a few years to get it over the line, because they kept pushing back on the data and saying, we don't have enough evidence. I said, you do. There's this, there's this. Anyway, got it over the line. I actually paid my money, so it was free access for psychiatrists. And I got a prize because it was the most downloaded course. Lots of psychiatrists learned for the first time about the role of hormones in the brain. Some of them started prescribing hormones to seeing the transformational effects. And then a few weeks ago, someone from the British Menopause Society contacted them to say that I over-exaggerated the effects of hormones, and they've taken the course down.
What?
And I've given them more evidence now, because we've published since, you know, the course came out. And they said that it's under review at the minute. And I told them that I would, if you don't tell me what's going on, I'll tell people in the theatre tour. So I have done, because I'm really sad. And they said, you know, I know they've had complaints from psychiatrists about it. And it's harming women. Like, I'm not saying that all mental health can be cured by hormones. I'm not saying all suicides can be reduced by hormones. But I am saying, and I've seen it time and time again, you know, I've saved lives from women who are on hormones, and they've tried everything else. You know, I'm in the theatre tour. I'm going with a guy, Jay, who's 26, and his mother had 30 years of being in a psychiatric hospital. She had her first mood change was after a termination of pregnancy. She had postnatal psychosis 3 times. She had PMDD. Her mood worsened when she tried contraception. Then she was perimenopause, and he just reached out to me on Instagram 18 months ago, and I managed to persuade the psychiatrist to prescribe for her. Now I've prescribed for her. The GP won't have anything to do with her, won't prescribe hormones, yet they'll prescribe the lithium, the quetiapine, the antidepressants for her. She's had electroconvulsive therapy over the years. Nothing has transformed her life like hormones. Wow. It's there in black, you know what I mean? But I've seen it so often. And like I said, I didn't know it when I did psychiatry training. I didn't know it as a GP. But you learn, you know, I've learned from scientific evidence, which is there when you look for it, and basic physiology. That's why in the book it was so important to write about the basics of how hormones work, so others can work it out for themselves. But then I've got a wealth of clinical experience. You know, we see so many women in our clinic, and we're constantly, you know, writing up our data, sharing it with other people. And we just have to join the dots, because the suffering is palpable, not just in the UK, but globally.
Well, of course. If women out there feel like there's something up and they've done nothing about it, what would your one bit of advice be?
I would say download Balance, get information that's right for you, ignore the noise. It's like having children. Everyone will tell you things. You've got to do what's right for you, and you've got to make sure that the decision is right for you. And no decision is irreversible as well. But I would also seek out someone who really understands hormones, have a really good conversation about it, but also try and have that mind shift about, is it right for not just me, but my family, my friends, my colleagues, if I keep ignoring it and not having hormones. And often I say to people who, a bit like you, going, not really sure, I'll often say, look, I'll rebalance your hormones in a physiological way. You've got to wait 3 to 6 months for them to have an effect, and then decide. If you don't want to carry on, I'm not coming round to your house and putting them on for you every day. Then you stop. But then you can decide. And it's really hard because also when you don't have hormones, your brain doesn't function properly. So you often overthink and catastrophize and think about things that really you shouldn't worry about.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah, well, there you go.
That's me. Now, obviously, many people out there will be in a heterosexual partnership and their partner will not have a fucking clue about any of this, will have checked out. This conversation weirdly seems to actually deter men completely, or they just think, oh God, time of the month, hormones, like all the usual stuff that we're fed. But if you're in a loving partnership, of course, you know, it's a two-way street. You want to support each other. If one person's struggling, the man or the woman, then you want to be there for each other. So I believe that men should be fully integrated into this conversation.
Absolutely.
What one thing do you think all men out there should understand about perimenopause, menopause?
They should probably listen to my podcast with Joe Warner, because that's a man talking about, you know, from a man's experience. They should know that hormones affect women, but we can do something about it. So I really feel that men, partners, whether it's heterosexual or same-sex relationship, they should be an advocate for that person, because you know, when you're with yourself 24/7, it's really hard. You can always sort of make excuses for how you're feeling. But if you notice that your partner's changing mentally, physically, or you're just not getting sex, you know, it doesn't matter. You should, rather than just normalizing it, say, look, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to listen to a podcast. I'm going to work out. Let's try and work together. And let's go to and find a doctor who can, you know, give you or talk to you about having treatment so you'll feel better. And so many partners come to the consultations with us, and it's really important.
That's so lovely.
It's so lovely. It's really lovely because, you know, they really care. It's not just because they want to have sex again. They really care. And, you know, divorce rates increases. It's quite awful, but we need to. And I only suffered symptoms for about 6 months, and my lovely husband really didn't join the dots at all. And I didn't, because I thought, I'm just working too hard. I'm just like, I've got 3 children. I can't cope with my work. The people at work weren't very nice to me. And everything was just, and it was actually my daughter, who's now 21, she was about 12. And she just said to me one day, Mummy, you're so cross and irritable. I just wish you'd have your period and your mood might improve. And then I suddenly went, oh, Sophie, I haven't had a period for about 6 months. That's why I've got all these symptoms. But it took her, and she, obviously, my children are very well educated about hormones now, but then she didn't know. She was just using common sense because she knew her friends, their mood improved when they got their periods. So we can't be normalizing it. And that's what I feel really sad. So many people are like, let me hold your hand and talk to you while you're having these symptoms. And people also think it's some transition that we go through. And there are all these people on Instagram saying, you know, it's a phase of our lives. It's not a phase in our lives. The low hormones last forever. And we have to wake up to the fact as women, we're less healthy the last 10 years of our life. So at the age of 60, most women are on 6, 7 medications. They're on antidepressants, blood pressure treatments, statins, painkillers. You know, like, why? But whereas if they're on natural body identical hormones, they won't be needing all these medications. So we're sort of investing in our future health as well with hormones.
And also all of those other medications you've just mentioned, we hear far less about the side effects of those.
Totally.
I mean, some of those, and I've been on antidepressants, I couldn't tell you what the side effects are.
No.
I didn't look into it.
No.
I just was desperate and was like, I'll take them. Whereas with this one, you could live under a rock and still have heard the breast cancer,
this is the
cancer
thing. So, you know, antidepressants have a risk of early death, dementia, osteoporosis.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So who tells people that? No one, because they're just pushed out like Smarties. I read the other day that 1 in 7 children in the US are taking antidepressants.
Oh, God.
Like it's awful. Yet you just mention the word HRT and everyone goes,
everyone knows.
Cancer.
Yeah.
Contraception, like, you know, that's where I feel like it's a double standard, really. But no one really talks about the benefits. And in fact, it was amazing because I'm sure you know the FDA in the US did this big announcement last year that they were removing the black box warning of estrogen. So you've got Dr. Martin Makary, who's the FDA health commissioner, who says that he estimates 50 million women have been harmed by not having hormones. Like, that's a big thing for the government to state that. So that's probably an underestimation. And that he was saying they have been harmed, they want to change it. But it's still every day, because you've already said 15% of women. And that's 15% of, on average, in areas of deprivation, it's as low as 2% of women who have hormonal changes are taking hormones. So the harm of not having those hormones is happening every single day.
I feel like I need to go on holiday to like process everything that you've just told me in the best possible way, because this is a conversation that I've wanted to have for so long, you know, since I hit 40, where I was like, oh yeah, things are changing. I'm noticing things. And I've just been like head in the sand. So I am so grateful for your time, for reading the book. I mean, we've literally skimmed the surface of a very big conversation. So I would urge everybody just to read the book, listen to your podcast, do the research if they want to get more information on this, to make the right decisions so we can all feel as empowered as possible to walk down a path that feels right for us, rather than be so bombarded that we bury our heads in the sand, pretend it's not happening, or deny ourselves of help that is available. Before we wrap things up, I want to first of all ask you a bit of a curveball question that's not related to menopause at all, but we're making a playlist at Happy Place of songs that make us feel great. And I wonder if there's one song that puts pep in your step, makes you feel great.
Well, I've been doing a bit of a warm-up song, like for the theatre tour, just because I don't want my voice to go. I've got so many tours left to do, shows left to do. So I really like My Life by Billy Joel.
Oh, I love that song.
Yeah, because it's a bit of a FU to other people, like, just leave me alone, it's my life. And my children sort of chose it for me last year when I was having some dark times because of the stuff that's going on, and it makes you just feel good, actually, and a bit stronger, which I think is great.
We all need that. I love that. And where, Louise, is your happy place?
Oh, on my yoga mat. I do yoga most mornings, and I do Ashtanga yoga, and my teacher's now 70, James Critchlow. He's amazing. I've known him for 23 years, and so my yoga mat, if I'm allowed to think, with James, because his voice, he's just so calm, and it's just like, I mean, you do yoga, don't you?
I do, but I've never done Ashtanga. I've never tried it even. What's the difference?
Well, it's the whole primary series. It's a whole, every breath is a movement. It's a lovely flow. It's really lovely. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes to do properly. Wow. So, but I do it with him every week. It's a bit difficult with the tour, but that's really powerful. And I just love doing headstands. It's like,
I love a headstand.
I just love it. And it's I think I also do it because I know, like, a lot of these people that really hate me can't do them, and I'm like, it's a bit of a power thing as well. But I do like it. I do. And I sort of think, if I don't keep doing them most mornings, one day I'm not going to be able to, and I want to be like a 70-year-old woman doing headstands.
Me too. I want to be able to do the splits forever. I also think turning yourself upside down once a day is a really good thing. I do handstands up against the kitchen cupboards every day, and there's something about it that is just like, I needed to do that. I don't even know why.
No, it's great. I love all that blood going to your brain. It's brilliant.
It's so good. Well, look, Dr. Louise, what an absolute pleasure to have you on. It's been a chat that I really needed to have, so thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me.